Hello, this is Paul Kelway, the Wildlife Preparedness and Response Manager at Oil Spill Response, and welcome to the next episode in a series of interviews I've been doing with the network of leading wildlife response organisations that have been participating in the multi-year Global Old Wildlife Response, or GOWRS project. GOWRS has now transitioned from a project to a Global Old Wildlife Response Service, a guaranteed four-person Tier 3 wildlife assessment team, and that's now part of OSRL's guaranteed SLA services to our members. To raise awareness of the incredible organisations who are collectively delivering that service, I'm hosting these conversations with each of the 10 GOWRS partners. Today I'm joined by Richard Thompson. Richard is the RSPCA Rehabilitation Manager at Mallydams Wood Wildlife Centre, which is near Hastings in the UK. Richard has been involved with the RSPCA for over 40 years and is responsible for formulating and delivering care for over 100 different species of native wildlife, including seabirds. During his time at Mallydams Wildlife Centre, he's also responded to a number of old wildlife incidents, both in the UK and internationally, including the Sea Empress oil spill in 1996 in Wales, and most recently serving as a section head for pre-wash care for over 500 oiled swans at the Bojabil oil spill in the Netherlands. Richard is also the main RSPCA contact for the European Old Wildlife Network, EUROA, and also the global network, GOWRS. Okay. All right, Richard. Well, now thanks very much for doing this interview with us. As you know, we've been doing an interview with each of the GOWRS partners over the last year or more now, actually. So, yeah, really happy to have a chance to chat with you about the RSPCA. And yeah, I guess then the obvious starting point there is just to have you just share a bit about the RSPCA. So, for those that don't know it, what is the RSPCA? What's the mission, and how do you carry out your work?
I think most people know who the RSPCA are. It's the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, but perhaps they don't know everything about the RSPCA. I think they associate it with cats and dogs, whereas actually we're much broader than that. The organisation has been around for nearly 200 years, so next year we celebrate our 200th year anniversary. So we're very excited about that. But yes, the RSPCA has been involved mostly with cruelty to start with. So that was the origins, dealing with animal cruelty. In fact, it was horses on the streets of London. Excuse me. And then they broadened to rehoming of animals, cats and dogs mostly. And then in the last 50 years, I think they looked at wildlife and thought, actually, we need to get involved with them as well. So for the past 40 years, I've been involved with wildlife. So I've been around at the RSPCA since 1990, well, at Mallydams since 1996, which is my current job of Mallydams Wood Wildlife Centre Manager.
That's right. And as you're saying, people might be familiar with the RSPCA from a animal welfare perspective and possibly from a domestic animals. But actually, as you say, that there are these wildlife centres that the RSPCA runs, and so you're the manager of one of those centres. And so, obviously, we're talking about old wildlife response. But what is really the work of Mallydams Wildlife Centre? What kind of wildlife do you care for, and what kind of situations do you respond to there?
We care for all wildlife species, all British native wildlife, except for deer. But our focus was on seabirds here. That was because originally, 50 years ago, when John Goodman came onto the site, somebody brought him an oiled razorbill. And so that set the scene for Mallydams to become one of the centres of excellence for oil birds. And ever since then, we've kind of pioneered some of the washing, the care, and the release protocols involved with oil wildlife.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and it's an important point that RSPCA has this long history of being involved in old wildlife response that goes back to the 60s and maybe even further back than that. But it's quite a long history, isn't it?
It is, and I think it was probably the Torrey Canyon that was the one that kind of like woke the RSPCA up to wildlife and oil birds, because we made so many mistakes during that time, and we weren't prepared for the the suffering that went on with oil birds. And so I think that was the thing that we started questioning what we were doing and how we were dealing with them. And then obviously we invested in money for research into how to wash birds, and then subsequently into how to release them and what the best methods are. So one of the highlights for me was being involved with a sea cage project. And this was a halfway house between rehabilitation and release. And this was conducted in Portland Harbour. And this was a project that was funded through the Wildlife Department. And initially there were lots of skeptics. Lots of people thought we were pushing the boundary too far. But actually, in the end, we answered a lot more questions than we would have answered just through conventional rehabilitation. And I have to say that one of the biggest successes we've had is only recently, and it's a bittersweet success because we had a recovery of one of the guillemots that we released from the sea cage in July this year. So that oiled guillemot has survived 22 and a half years. And so that's a remarkable thing for a little bird like that. And how many times has that bird bred? How many? And it's just, it's just remarkable, these little birds and how brave they are. And, what we do is significant when it comes to that individual bird.
Yeah, that's really incredible. And as you say, something like that sea cage project where you're really getting a better understanding of some of the challenges and just the hopefully the ability to survive in the long term in what are obviously pretty harsh conditions for seabirds, but obviously to know that all that effort to get them back into a situation where they can go out and thrive and breed in the wild is obviously the goal.
Yeah, and we're not complacent about just one recovery. We know that we have to strive and we have to look into these things further. And as we don't get so many oil birds now, it's even more important for us to be prepared. I think the one thing is that we have this optimistic bias that we never think this is going to happen. And so therefore we know, as we saw with our European colleagues, the Rotterdam spill, nobody expected a spill involved with 500 swans, yet it happened. And we had to respond and we had to be prepared for that.
Absolutely. Well, and actually that brings me on to, I guess, just asking you, you've already talked about some of the work that the RSPCA has done over the years in terms of old wildlife and old wildlife response, but is there a particular response or story of your involvement in this field that further illustrates just some of the work that you do? I know there's been a few different incidents and responses over the years.
Yes, I've been involved with quite a few locally. There's the tricolour. So there was a massive response in Belgium, but actually not many people knew that the RSPCA were involved because it hit outside of the channel as well. And so we had nearly 500 birds from that response, from that oil spill. That was all self-funded. That was business as usual. So we had to find the funding for that. We never got any compensation. We never got any insurance money from that. So we had to really fund. It was self-funded. But we've had some recoveries from them, good recoveries, 5 or 10 years later. So we are measuring our success on those recoveries as well. And of course, I was involved with the Sea Empress, the large spill that was in West Wales. And that was a big response for the RSPCA. And we had industry funding that. So we had a relationship with industry in that case. So, we're quite aware of how to manage a big spill.
Yeah, it's interesting. A couple of really big incidents there that you're mentioning, and I think you're also highlighting that the RSPCA has this pedigree and history of also being involved internationally and supporting responses elsewhere and working in partnership with other organisations. And obviously, in the context of that, the RSPCA has been one of the partners in the GOWRS project over these quite some years now. And this is a question I've asked everybody that I've spoken to, but from an RSPCA point of view, that experience of being involved in the global old wildlife response system when it was a project and all the work that was done, what do you see as some of the real benefits that have come out of that from the RSPCA's perspective?
Personally, I think the document that we produced, the guidelines, the IPCA guidelines are phenomenal. I think I learned an awful lot about other species. I mean, I'm used to dealing with auks and guillemots, but I learnt about pelicans, and so that that information sharing is vital, I think, and also the contacts, the networking that we have involved with the other organisations. Many of these are now good friends, but I know that if push came to shove, if there was anything happening in the UK, I know that you could trust some of these people to come along and respond with the RSPCA. And so I think that's certainly the benefits as well.
Yeah, it's a theme that's come up time and time again, and I think it speaks to the importance of it. Really, that collaboration is really at the heart of this, and can make such a difference, as well as obviously having the structures and the processes and the protocols to know that everybody works in the same way. And that IPCA technical support document that you mentioned, it is a fantastic document, and again a terrific outcome to have all of these experienced organizations working together to really define or agree on those key principles of responding to old wildlife. It's an absolutely fantastic resource. Now, obviously, in the last year or so, GOWRS has transitioned from that project into being a live service. So the GOWRS Soiled Wildlife Assessment Service, which is the 4-person assessment team. I know there's been lots of work that's gone into that, and obviously the fact that that can now be accessed through OSRL by our members. How does that change things for the RSPCA? What does the having that now transition to being a service mean specifically for the RSPCA?
I think it opens their eyes to actually that we are not prepared, that we need to prepare more. As I say, there is this optimistic bias, and the RSPCA is a large organisation that has lots of things to do with animal welfare, and so they may not put the resources into oil spill response if there's no oil spills. But I know that speaking to my managers, that they feel the value of the GOWRS relationship and the value of this to the RSPCA needs to be kept going. We can't move away from this. This is important for us to continue to work with. And the assessment team is just part of that, isn't it? The experience that you will get deploying people on an assessment team not just helps us, but also helps industry as well, and gives them an idea of actually, what's involved with a, response. And I think we had like all the other organisations, we had that individual touch to it, because, our heart is there to rehabilitate and release oil wildlife.
Absolutely, and it's it's an important point to note that, of course, oil spills don't happen all the time, that ultimately we don't want there to be incidents, but ultimately the ability to respond and be prepared when there are needs that continuing investment. So I guess one of the elements here is the fact that you, as the RSPCA, as the other partners, are connected into this international community where not only are you then able to be a resource and be a support, for instance, elsewhere, but ultimately it helps to keep the topic alive back home, and hopefully enables to some extent for that experience gained through the international work to then feed hopefully back into UK preparedness as well.
Indeed, everybody benefits from this.
What about you mentioned the ability to, from a member's point of view, to mobilise this, but as far as having that international team, that tier 3 team that could be called out to an incident, and I guess I'm thinking about parts of the world where maybe there really is very limited preparedness. What do you see as the real importance and value of having that assessment function as a sort of initial first wave function in a response?
I think you're getting the best team possible in the world to go to some of these places where they aren't prepared. I'm thinking of some of the countries like Nigeria, where there is issues in response and access to this, and also train people to be able to respond to an oil spill. I think this is very complex and very difficult and challenging. I can't say this is an easy thing, and I don't think we've got all the answers to it. But I think, the longer we're doing this, the more experience we get and the better we'll be able to respond to anything in a more complex situation. I mean, I know there was the SANCOB dealt with the Tristan da Cunha, and actually in the end there wasn't really a great deal they could do for those animals there, and it was disappointing. But I think we've learned an awful lot since then about how we can assist and help in these other areas that we're not familiar with, perhaps.
Yeah, it's very true. And I think you mentioned Nigeria as just as an example. And I think, one of the, I suppose, aims of this is really this idea also that over time, by not just responding to incidents, but being involved in exercises, maybe identifying local organizations in different countries that also are keen to learn and maybe have had some experience with incidents, that tier 3 team, that tier 3 service can really help to hopefully enhance the local preparedness as well. So it's not just about having that best team in the world to call in, but having that best team in the world really help, hopefully, to improve that preparedness over time, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yes.
Well, you mentioned SANCOB, and SANCOB are actually going to be the organisation that I interview next. And so I'm wondering if I can just ask you to say a few things about them. What do you know about SANCOB? Maybe you can just sort of share a bit by way of introduction to their interview.
I've been to SANCOB in a personal capacity when I led a group of RSPCA people. We did a tour of South Africa, and SANCOB were very kind to open their doors to us on a VIP tour. And we had a VIP tour, and this was in 2006. But I understand since then things have happened, and the facility has grown enormously now, and they are very busy. I also know that some members of the RSPCA went to respond to the MV Treasure in 2000, I think it was. Is it, Paul?
That's right.
Yeah, and so some of them came back and said, all we did was help with the fish all day. But they said, do you know what? It was absolutely amazing experience. And with 80,000 penguins, something like that were maybe not.
I think 20,000 oiled and 20,000 that were preemptively captured.
But they said it was an amazing experience, and the team down there were fantastic. And of course, now they have a fantastic team in Nikki and Monica. And, these are people working really hard on the cutting edge of trying to save endangered animals from oil and other issues as well. But I mean, it's imperative that we can assist them as well in their cause there.
Yeah, absolutely. As you say, a wonderful organisation, another fantastic partner in the GOWRS project and service, and another one that we'll be featuring on these interviews. So thank you for that, Richard. And just before we close, anything else that you wanted to share that we didn't cover about the RSPCA's role or GOWRS?
Well, now I have actually been appointed the Operations Oil Response Coordinator now. So with the funding, that allows me to have one day a week, only one day at the moment, to actually focus on the GOWRS work and sort of promote preparedness within the society. So we're organising training courses for our own staff, and also trying to get other people close to the level for the assessment team. So at the moment, there's very few people in the society that is available for the assessment team, and that's no fault of our own. It's just because high turnovers in staff and oil birds perhaps not on the agenda all the time, but it will give us an opportunity to raise the skills and experience for people underneath me, because I'm not always going to be around. So
that's great to hear. I'm glad that you're able to do that, and obviously pass on that knowledge to others as well. And I wish you all the best with that. And certainly, RSPCA as an organisation, as you say, they do an incredible amount of work. But thank you for all you've done to really drive the wildlife work forward over the years. And wish you all the best with that, Richard, and obviously with the ongoing work with the rest of the GOWRS network as well. And thanks again for having the chat with me today.
Thank you, Paul. It's been a privilege.